It's so incredible to me just how quickly these guys will devour just about anything. Hey Molly girl, how's my Molly? Doing good this morning? Yeah, you are. Such a pretty kitty. So we are officially in Vermont fall. I mean, not from a calendar perspective, from like a temperatures and weather perspective. It was like in the low 40s this morning. I don't know, we might still have a chance of a late breaking summer, but I'm starting to see all the signs of fall. For example, let's see if they left one for me this morning. My geese have started laying their fall eggs. Fall eggs are kind of rare for a goose to lay, but I've found that the last couple of years, I always get a couple of birds that just start laying this time of year, which is kind of off cycle. It's too late in the year for me to try to hatch these eggs, but I will probably end up selling them online to folks who are in warmer climates. So check goldshawfarm.com. Link down below if you want to find out information about ordering these. Want your breakfast? All right, buddy. There you go. Enjoy. Pablo, stop eating Toby's food. Hey, buddy boy. Good to see you learning how to use your door. Don't let Pablo eat your breakfast, though, huh? So given the fact that we are so close to winter, or winterish times, figured it'd be a good time to take you guys around the property today and show you certain parts of the farm you don't see on the regular. But what I want to show you is that parts of the farm you wouldn't even think about are actually able to also produce food for us. I mean, I guess to start off, I've got the obvious ones, right? We've got the kitchen garden here that my wife Allison maintains, and right now this is providing most of our produce that we eat. We're managing to can and freeze some of the production from here. We also have a fair amount of winter squashes that you can see right here that will store a lot longer than a lot of the other vegetables, and that will mean food for us later this year. I had been working on a plan to try to produce potatoes in this patch of weeds that you see right here, but once again I've grown way too busy to try to do too much work on it, and the weeds really took over, and it doesn't look like the potatoes ever did. So I guess I'm gonna have to clear this off and start again next year, but so it is. One growing project though that I did do that has been doing super well, you guys might have seen a video that I did, I think it was back in May, where I planted a whole bunch of chestnut seedlings, and here you can see them. I got a couple hundred seedlings right in this one raised bed. These trees probably have a couple more weeks of growing before they start to go dormant for the year. A lot of them though are doing really well. I mean, this tree is probably about 30 inches tall. Most of them are approaching 24 inches tall. For a year-old bare root seedling, that's really good. And so I'm super excited about what's coming from that. Now those chestnuts, I'm either gonna sell them to folks, and I have pretty much everybody who's reserved them so far. So I know I keep getting emails from folks asking to buy chestnut seedlings, but unfortunately we're all out for the year. And then I'm also taking a lot of those chestnuts myself and planting them in our permaculture orchard. The permaculture orchard was something that I started back in 2017, so it's been going for a couple of years now. Still not quite producing food, but it's one of those things that I realize if I'm patient enough, it will eventually start producing food. Alongside the permaculture orchard, we also have what I like to call the kitchen orchard. So this is just sort of more select varieties of stuff, whereas the permaculture orchard is really grown for scalability. You can see we're starting to get apples here from some of our apple trees. Those are really tasty apples. I should probably pick them pretty soon. I think that's a pear tree over there. I think that's a peach tree over here. This shrub, I think it was a jostaberry, just has not been doing well, and I think I'm gonna have to retire that one. This right here was our currant, and it did really well this year. We got a lot of food from that. Over here we have some mulberries, and these mulberry trees, they were producing pretty well for quite some time. I'm probably actually gonna come in here and start pruning them, as well as taking cuttings to produce future mulberries. I think the mulberry is a really important tree around the farm just because it offers you fruit, it attracts wildlife, it's good for pollinators, and actually the leaves, like the actual leaves themselves, are relatively high in protein. And so I'm actually going to start experimenting pretty soon with using these leaves as fodder for the animals. And it becomes another way to cut my food bills. The other way I'm going to be cutting my food bill next year is, as I've talked about this in other videos, and probably the next video I make will be a build video, showing you some of the construction that's going to happen right about this spot where you can see the geese hanging out. That's going to be our big hoop house. You can see the steel for it right here, some over there, Molly Barn Cat over here. And the plan is that's going to be some winter housing for the geese and for the chickens, but then in the summer months I'll use it to grow additional food and maybe have less weed pressures. Let's see if I can find something here. There we go. So more examples of food that's just kind of growing here around the farm. You see these right here? These are grapes and they taste great. A little tart, but definitely edible. They have seeds because they're wild grapes. What I like to do with them is either make juice out of them or make a jelly out of them because it lets you strain the seeds out. The other thing you can do with these wild grapes is just pick them and again use them as feed for your animals. See, those are some happy chickens right there. By the way, not sure if you can see, the Rosie had 3 more little baby chicks. And they're right there. So far they're doing pretty good. I hope they grow up big enough and fast enough for before the winter starts to come. Okay, bucket duck, out you go. Out for the day. There you go. Our bucket duck, she is healing up pretty nicely. Her feet still have a little bit of a limp, but it's gotten so much better in the last week or so. So I'm really happy to see that. I'm still giving her some time here in quarantine. Just makes it easier to make sure she gets proper nutrition, as well as she doesn't re-injure it, and I can easily catch her and give her 2 times a day treatment. But right now, all signs are pointing to a really healthy and speedy recovery for bucket duck. And let me dump her gross water. I know one source of food that everybody is aware of are our bees. You can see our beehive is nice and active. Everybody's getting warmed up for the day. I'm not gonna take a ton of honey from these guys. I'll probably only take about as much as Allison and I might need for the next year. I'm gonna do my best to overwinter them. And so in order to do that, that means leaving them with as much resource as possible. I know I get a lot of flack in the comments because I do such a bad job keeping bees, but I'm learning and I'm getting better. And in case folks wonder, yeah, I do have actually 2 bee mentors. I have one, a friend of mine who's actually in Virginia, who I get some good advice from. And then I have another who's actually here in the local area who's helped me with a couple hands-on things. And so, yes, I do have bee mentors, but that does not mean I don't screw things up still. You know, being committed to farming is very much about being committed to being a lifelong learner. And I like that about the farm, but it's also something that requires effort and energy. You can see our permaculture orchard here. And as I've said before, I like to let this grow up wild. I usually mulch it once or twice a year, but I got these trees like apple trees here, black locust trees in the back. I tried to grow Siberian pea shrub right about here, but that was a failure, and so I'm trying for other things. Oh, would you look at this? You got a fresh groundhog hole. Toby, what do you make of that? Did that groundhog hole spring up on your watch, buddy? There's some more apple trees that are growing and doing really well. Chestnut, getting really big. I was actually hoping that this chestnut would produce nuts this year. It hasn't, but probably in the spring I'm gonna cut off the tree guard and let it grow naturally and see if that helps promote nut production. It'll be year 5 for these trees, and so that should be right around the time that they start producing. Got one of our lone drakes hanging out here in the pasture. What you doing there, buddy? Why aren't you with the rest of your flock? Can't tell if that's Yojo or Quacky Chan. Gotta see him from the front to tell you. So now the next food spot on our farm I want to show you guys is going to require a little bit of travel. So come with me. Watch over the farm. There we go. This is what I was looking for. See these little nuts right here? So these are beech nuts. I pop open the burr. You can actually see the nut right here. They come in this like little interesting shell. When you break it open, I'll usually feel my mouth. You can see inside here, it makes for this nice like meat nut. The nut itself is actually pretty tasty. The beech nut is super nutritious. You know, you could store these. You know, you can see we got a couple of beech nut trees right here in this spot. There's actually a couple more down over there and a couple more down over there. The beech nut tree doesn't necessarily produce nuts every year, but when it does, it can be wonderful. This tree is getting close to being ripe and ready for picking. I would actually probably want to give it maybe another week or two. Once it is ready, what I'll end up doing is harvesting all the beech nuts here, or as many as I possibly can, and I will feed them to the geese. The geese love them, and I'm actually finding that it fattens up the geese a little bit if they eat them. And so way back here in the very back part of our pasture, you've got, again, a secret stash of food that some people wouldn't even think about, that's going to help me raise fatter geese and reduce my food bill cost. And so I think for anybody who's out there thinking about buying their own property or starting a farm, you know, thinking about these types of sources of food, it's just a great opportunity for how you can manage your property. You'll hear from a lot of experts as well as yahoos like me that you often want to wait a full calendar year to be on your property before you make any major changes. And part of the reason, and one of the things I've really found has been awesome about doing that, is you start to explore and learn more about your property, and you will discover certain things like this beech nut grove that I have back here. If I hadn't been patient and if I hadn't spent like a whole year just sort of watching things, I don't think I would have ever been able to pull something like this off. And so just my suggestion for folks would be, you know, do take that time and really do look around at the different plants that you have, because knowing that beech nut trees do grow well here, I also plan on taking some of the beech nuts that I harvest in a couple of weeks and planting them as seedlings and trying to sprout them for, I guess it would be in, you know, pretty much do it the same cycle that I do my chestnuts, and could be another tree crop that we're growing here on the farm. All right. Let's keep exploring, huh? So here's another spot I wanted to show you guys, because I would argue that these are the tastiest apples we have on our farm. And I think they should be just about ready for eating. Let's test one out. Oh, they're absolutely perfect. So good. You can actually see I'm probably even a little late, because there's a fair amount of drops on the ground, and it looks like a lot of the deer have picked through the lower apples. So these two apple trees, probably the best apple trees we have on our farm. They've been here for years and years. I mean, I don't even know how old these trees might be. And I'm not even sure if these are like a true cultivar of apple, or they're just wild apples that just sort of sprung up here. Like if I actually look at the tree itself, I can't tell if there's any grafting activity that's been going on here. And so my guess is that these tasty apples are just the natural deal. You know, a lot of people are really down on the idea of wild apples because they just call them crab apples and they write them off. Look at this tree and look at what it's doing. And I actually think the genetic diversity that a tree like this will provide you is really important, because it helps create more apple types. You know, like if you think about most of the apples in the world, most of them are like a handful of different cultivars or species that exist. You know, Macintosh, Pink Lady, Gala, Red Delicious, Granny Smith. Like every time you think about an apple like that, that's all the same type of apple tree. And so it all came from one original tree, and people just keep using the scion wood, which is like the trimmings when you prune an apple tree. And they'll use that wood to propagate future trees. They graft it onto the root of a different apple tree. Meanwhile, the wild apple trees are what happens when you take an apple seed and you plant it. And what I love about that is you get so much variety. You get variety in shape, color, taste, disease resistance, fruit size, timing of the fruit. Like all of those things become genetic characteristics that vary. And apple trees don't go true to seed. So for example, like the apples that are falling from this tree, I don't know if you guys could even see that one apple that just dropped. The apples that are coming off of this tree right now are gonna produce apple seeds that are very different than anything else that was coming on this tree. And so like people almost, the genetic diversity of the two parents, so the source of pollen that pollinates the flower, which actually produces the fruit, that genetic diversity differs from parent to child. I like wild apples because they're easy to produce, they're very cheap to produce. I grow hundreds of wild apple trees here on our farm and sprout them and then try to scatter them around various parts of the farm. Even if the apple that's produced doesn't taste great, I do find that it works for a number of other purposes. So for example, I will harvest all the wild apples we have on our farm, or at least as many as I can get my hands on, and I will press that into apple cider later this year. And that cider will either be drank on the spot and it tastes absolutely delicious, or I'll bottle it up and turn it into hard cider that my friends and I can enjoy during the winter. The wild apple trees, and especially when they drop like this and you can see them on the ground, they become great food for wildlife around the farm. Like for example, you can just see these fresh deer turds. Probably a deer was here earlier this morning, snacking away and eating these apples, and then decided to leave some of the apples.
How do you like them apples?
What's really nice about that is, right, you've got a whole fertility cycle happening here. Where the apple tree is producing fruit, the fruit is attracting ruminants like deer. The deer are eating some of the fruit, and then the deer are leaving some fertilizer in place here as well. Sometimes out here, sometimes closer to the tree. But back to that whole theory you guys always hear me talking about a farm being an ecosystem. It doesn't have to just have your livestock be part of that ecosystem. It can also be the wildlife and wild plants that you have on the farm that are a part of that ecosystem too. I'll probably come back here with a basket a little later today, do a proper picking of this tree, but I'm gonna grab some of these apples right now just to bring back to Allison. This sure beats going to the grocery store. Another cool thing about the apples and the apple trees is there's a lot of trees that are actually much closer to my ducks and geese, and I'll usually go around there and pick up all the apples that fall on the ground and give them to the ducks and geese. Particularly the geese and chickens actually really like them as food. Also, when I make cider, I'll take the pulp and I will often feed that to the birds, as well as just spread it out in the pasture, and ultimately it will turn into little apple seedlings. Like here, let me show you what I mean. So if you look, like right over here, so last year I dumped out a bunch of apple pulp right in this spot where you see all these weeds right now, right? And a lot of weeds have sprung up. But what I'm also finding are little apple seedlings. Like here's one right here. And now here's another one right here. Here's another one right here. Another one right here. And so if I was gonna go through this area right now, I could easily find probably at least 24 apple tree seedlings that are wild apple tree seedlings. So I don't know what the fruit's gonna actually taste like. But once they go dormant this fall, like probably October-ish, I'm gonna pull them up out of the ground and I can stick them in different parts of the farm. I can give them to friends and family, and they can just do a lot of good for the farm. And so for those of you guys out there who are really stressing about, you know, getting expensive tree seedlings and getting the perfect tree seedlings to start your farm or homestead, I would encourage you to not do that and recognize that there is an opportunity that can emerge for you if you just be a little creative and a little inventive and a little patient in terms of the different types of food you can find and create around your farm. Here, chickens, have an apple.